we are talking about the upsell formula. Specifically, we're going to be talking about how you can implement AOV increasing strategies for Q4. So we're really going to be looking into holiday sales, everything from Black Friday, Cyber Monday to all through Q4, because we all know that sales start way earlier than Black Friday, Cyber Monday these days. But what can you be implementing on your site in Q4 to help increase AOV? So that is what the focus of today's event is going to be. For everybody who is joining today, we'll also be doing some live teardowns. So if you guys hang around through the main part of the presentation until the end, we will also do some live site teardowns for anybody who wants a teardown done. No pressure, but if anybody wants to sacrifice himself as tribute, let's take a look at your site. We will take a look at that today and do some live teardowns either on upsells. So if you have upsells you're already running that you'd like us to take a look at, it'd be fantastic. If not, we're also happy to just do some live teardowns of your actual homepage or main pages on the site. All right, so who's joining us today? So myself, Alan Burt, I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Stout. We also run the Commerce Lab newsletter, and that's where most of you guys are probably coming from today. And I'm joined with me today with Eric Myers, who is our head of optimization, and Julia, who is our agency partner at Rebuy. And Julia is going to be helping us understand how we can implement some of these strategies with Rebuy today. You guys all just want to say hi?
Hey, everyone.
Great to be here.
Awesome. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and jump in. What we're going to be talking about today is we've got 3 parts we're going to talk about up front, and then we're going to jump into any site teardowns that you guys want us to take a look at today. What we're going to be covering first is a framework. So if you guys have joined any of our past webinars, we always like to make sure that we're providing somewhat of a framework that you guys can follow when thinking about building or optimizing your current site. And so today we're talking about upsells and cross sells. So we want to give you a framework for how you should be thinking about implementing upsells and cross sells. One of the things we see happen all the time is that brands will just sort of slap upsells and cross sells on the site without really thinking through how to do it in the most successful way possible. So we're going to break down very carefully the way that you should be thinking about the right type of upsell and cross sell for your site and how you should be implementing it. So we'll do that first. And then we're going to actually show you guys a few very specific examples and strategies for the holidays. So there's lots of ways you can implement upsells and cross sells, lots of different sort of permutations of them. Eric's going to talk through the ones that we see to be the most successful during the holiday season. And then finally, Julia is joining us today so that she can give us some really good insights about how to set up these strategies using Rebuy. Rebuy is our preferred partner, our preferred tool that we use of all of our clients when we are implementing upsells and cross sells on our brand sites. And so she's going to walk through some of the ways that you can implement those very easily on your site. So that is the goal of today. Obviously, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them just in the chat at any point in time. And we will sort of address them as we go through. We'd love to make this more of a conversation versus just a presentation for you guys. Okay, so let's talk about upsells. Ultimately, why do we care, right? So the benefit of an upsell, and this is a conversation that we have with brands all the time, and we always get to the point in the conversation where we say, what problem can't be solved by you increasing the amount of revenue that you generate per site visitor. So if you think about it, right, every site visitor that's coming to the site, on average, they're spending a certain amount of money on average. If you could increase that amount that they are spending with you on average, it makes everything else easier. It makes it easier to scale advertising, makes it easier to scale the team, scale the business. There's just every aspect of marketing becomes easier when you are able to generate more revenue on average per site visitor. And we talk a lot about improving conversion rates on site, reducing friction on site to make it easier for people to complete a purchase. But just as important is, how do we increase AOV? How do we increase that average order value of every single visitor that is coming to the site? I found this was a post by Ryan Bartlett, who's the co-founder at True Classic, the t-shirt brand. And he made this post, this is probably about a year ago at this point, kind of talking about the dramatic increase they had in their AOV by testing into upsells and cross sells. Specifically for them, they found the most and best results looking at checkout and at the cart optimizations. But they were able to almost triple, from $36 to $94 over 3 years of just consistent, constant tweaking and testing to improve their AOV. And the reason I share this is because I think a lot of folks just assume they can slap upsells or cross sells on site, and it'll automatically improve AOV and it'll automatically improve average revenue per visitor. But the reality is you really need to take a very deliberate approach into testing into these and thinking through where to implement them and testing different permutations of them. And so what you'll see is sort of a recurring theme as we talk through this today is that it's not just a one-time implementation. You really need to be thinking through what is the right upsell cross-sell for our audience, and then how do we make sure we're actually implementing it in a way that's going to improve revenue. And this is the big problem with upsells. We love upsells and cross-sells, but the problem with them is that they can be very difficult to measure. They can hurt conversions and they can hurt revenue if not implemented correctly. And something I literally had this conversation with a brand the other day where they implemented a bunch of upsells and cross sells, and they're like, "Well, yeah, they're great, they're working. Our AOV went up, by 20%." And then my question then was, how did that affect revenue per session? How did it affect average revenue per visitor to the site? And they didn't know. So to them, an increase in AOV was seen as success, but they actually had no idea what the overall impact to revenue was. That increase in AOV could have come with a decrease in the conversion rate because people maybe were actually dropping out of that purchase funnel to go look at the product they had added to cart, as an example. So we find it to be really, really important to have these conversations with brands to say, look, upsells are phenomenal. You should absolutely be implementing them, but you need to be testing into them. And you need to be finding what is the right upsell combination for your brand. And so this is the framework that I want to give you guys before we actually jump into some very specific strategies. But the framework that we use when we think about upsells is the following. These are the three sort of what I call questions to ask before you actually launch either an upsell or a cross-sell offer on the site. And the first question to ask is the price, meaning the price of the product that you're upselling and cross-selling, is the price negligible compared to the main product? Now, if you're selling, somebody has a $20 product added to cart and you're upselling them on a $200 product, obviously that's going to be a very difficult upsell, right? That's a huge hurdle burden to overcome in terms of an increase in price and order value. So you want to ideally be negligible compared to the main product. And we'll talk about some examples of when Eric talks through strategies of sort of how to think through what the right price point is. Number two is there an incentive to purchase now together versus later separately? And this is going to be really important in Q4 because at the end of the day, you want to maximize that Q4 revenue. You want somebody making the decision to buy this upsell or this cross-sell, add it to cart with their current product, and you want them to make that decision now. Versus somebody saying, okay, well, look, yes, this upsell or this other product you're offering me looks great, but I don't need this yet. I'm just going to complete my current purchase and I'll come back in the future to buy it. So how do we actually incentivize that purchase now versus later? And then third, does this cross-sell or that cross-sell or upsell make the main product more valuable or desirable? And an example of this would be, let's say I'm buying a pair of boots, like leather boots. And you're going to cross-sell me or as an add-on upsell, a shoe shiner or like a leather care kit, something that ultimately actually makes the boot that I'm buying more valuable because it's a care kit that's going to make that product allow me to take care of it in the future. So the idea is make sure you're not just sort of randomly selecting product. You need to be using data to make those decisions and ideally asking the question, does this make the existing product more valuable? And we can talk through lots of examples of ways to do that. But if your team is setting up upsells and cross-sells, these are the three questions to always ask before you do it. And then the final component of all of this, and this is the most important, which I think very few brands truly do, is you need to be making data-driven decisions by testing into upsells and cross-sells and bundles whenever possible. I can't tell you how many times we have conversations with brands that have added upsells, cross-sells to their cart as an example, and it's actually decreased their overall revenue because they've not thoughtfully put the right products there. And the beauty of, frankly, platforms like Rebuy is that you can actually A/B test the upsells and cross-sells that you are offering. So highly recommend utilizing A/B testing as a way to make sure you're actually increasing revenue with every upsell and cross-sell that you're implementing on the site. So that's the framework. Very simple framework in questions to ask before you launch upsells and cross-sells. So what I'd love to do now is we can sort of transition and we can have Eric talk through very specifically the three actionable strategies that we would recommend implementing specifically for Q4. And so these are things, and Eric can speak to this a little bit more, but these are recommendations that one, these would apply year round, but these are the ones that you should specifically be looking at for increasing AOV in Q4. Eric, do you want to jump in from here?
Yeah. So the when it comes to upsells and cross sells, there's really two main considerations, and we'll try to cover a little bit of both. First is where do we put them? And second is what do we put inside of them? The first, where to put them, the most effective place that we consistently see in terms of take rate, right? Of how many items are added from a particular product recommendation is within the drawer cart. So if you have a drawer cart on your site, you definitely want to make sure that you're recommending products within that drawer cart. I think there's probably a few reasons why this works well. You have an audience that is really close to purchase, right? It's a high quality audience. They're ready to make a purchase. They've indicated some intent to share some of their dollars with you. So let's make a product recommendation to these users. The second consideration is what should we put there? There's two things that we have a lot of success with in terms of which types of items we should be recommending within those drawer carts. You can put a complementary product here, building on what Alan mentioned about like boots and then adding something that increases like the utility or like lifetime value of that product to that consumer, or something that just is really well matched to it. So think like if you're selling bikinis, then add-on can be bikini wash. If you're selling hydration powder, it can be a water bottle. Or if you're unsure of what to add, you can also go in your Shopify analytics, go to the reports section, and there's a report in there called items bought together. That'll show which items are paired together most frequently in carts for your audience and what they're actually selecting from your catalog. It's not a report that I see a lot of people often utilize, but it's really helpful, at least as like a starting point, right? If you don't know where to begin, that's a great place to determine where to begin. Aside from that, manual analysis tools like Rebuy can really supercharge that and cut out a lot of the manual process of analyzing that data to determine what to go in there. Another thing we also like to look for there is the price of those items. So the sweet spot that we tend to see work most effectively is if the products that are recommended there are 20% of the cart's current value. So if you have a cart that is at $100, then recommend the items that are most popular or most well matched to the products in the cart that are at around a $20 price point. Additionally, you can also make recommendations based on the delta between the current cart value and that free shipping, if that is applicable, so that users, as they add items to the cart, they're also moving closer towards unlocking free shipping. Then if you take a look at the next slide, Alan, another thing that we like to do in terms of product recommendations is using them to bundle items together and offer a gift with purchase instead of a discount. So a lot of times it's really probably likely that you can source a gift that has a cost that's lower than your discount rate. That way we can improve both your top line and your margins. Now, why the bundle specifically? Is that bundle is really helpful when it comes to new customer acquisition break-evens. We see so many dilutive acquisition funnels out there. A lot of times first we'll pay Meta for a few impressions and then again for a click. And then as soon as we get someone to the website, we offer them a discount and sacrifice some margins to increase the likelihood of that sale. Maybe through that, we're growing our list size, but maybe that customer also comes back via paid search or maybe they find an affiliate or browser extension that offers them a different promo code. At each step along the way, we're kind of like exposing our margins. So in order to preserve that, a lot of times we focus our strategy on bundles, specifically so that we can increase first order value. That way, we're paying for more of that customer acquisition cost in the first transaction. That way, we can be less reliant on our repurchase rates. So let's say, for example, your average order value is $80 and you have a 10% discount rate. So your net average order value is $72. If you can find a gift with a cost of less than $8 in that scenario, then you handcuff that to a bundle that's maybe a price point closer to, let's say, $100, then that's where we start to see that growth at both the gross and net margin on each of those sales. The kicker to that is if that gift can be something that improves that customer experience, just like the cross-sell addition on the drawer cart. If it's something that improves the customer experience, even better. So, for example, if you have like a powdered mushroom tea, then we gift with purchase that with like a frother or maybe a scoop or something so that it improves that user experience of the product. So then it also increases the likelihood that they'll be back again. Then our third strategy we'll take a look at is farther down funnel. If you just go to the next slide, Alan, is offering upsells in the checkout. Now, within Shopify, you can offer upsells in the checkout, and we take a little bit of a different approach to this tactic than we do in the drawer cart, because at this point, the user has a lot more effort that they have to put into it, right? If they don't already have Shop Pay set up, they're going to have to fill out a bunch of fields. They might have to go find their credit card. So we like to think of recommendations here that require less decision making, less cognitive load in order to decide to take on that upsell. This can be a broadly complementary, low-cost item, just like in the drawer cart. But during the holidays, there's a few different tactics that we'll utilize to make the most of the type of shopper that we're most likely to see an increase of during October, November, and December. To do that, we'll do things like gift cards. Gift cards are a great way to upsell in the checkout because we can frame it as a way for users to save themselves a stop somewhere else, right? Like get some of your gifting done now. If they're making a purchase for themselves, then they can add a gift card in order to give that to somebody else. Or the inverse, if perhaps maybe they're shopping for a gift for someone else and they want to get a little gift card for themselves. This is really helpful. A lot of times we'll also even discount that gift card. So if you have, for example, like a $100 gift card and you're going to sell it for $90, users are going to be even more incentivized to add that to their cart. And that discount could even be seen as a piece of your customer acquisition cost, right? If that user is then taking their purchase and gaining you another customer by gifting them a gift card, then that's probably going to be a cheaper customer acquisition cost than what you're paying some of the cost per click platforms out there. Another really successful one is service upsells. So something like adding a gift box or gift wrap. Or one way that is even less of a lift on the fulfillment side of things is priority shipping. If you can offer an upsell of something like priority shipping, that's additional revenue that's going to drop straight to your bottom line just by moving those orders to the front of your fulfillment line. That way users get them sooner, which is always a concern under the magnifying glass during holiday, right? Is this going to deliver in time for the party that I'm going to, that I want to gift it to, or to the holiday that I'm gifting it to someone for? So priority shipping is a great addition, as well as gift cards for the holiday season. Beyond the holiday season, that bump to free shipping is also really effective here in the checkout, because this is the first point for a lot of users that they'll be introduced to the idea of, oh, am I going to have to pay shipping? And if I do, how much is that shipping? When someone enters the checkout process, that's when they start to see these additional details, which makes something like a bump to free shipping strategy even that much more effective when it's this far into the funnel at the checkout.
Cool. I love that. I love the holiday twist in this too. I think there's the gift card pieces. I think people don't quite do enough of in checkout, and holidays it makes so much more sense. And I think the other piece that we're seeing a lot with brands that we talk about is in past holidays, everybody is just sort of, it's always been like a race to the bottom with discounting, right? Incentives via discounts, which really eat into margin. I think the free gift with purchase is such a interesting take on that for two reasons. One, you can do it more profitably, and then two, it also doesn't come with the sort of the brand degradation that can come sometimes with over discounting and sort of the any sort of harm that would come to sort of the brand perception. And so you can sort of battle both of those two with the free gift with purchase. So that's why I love that as a great holiday strategy.
And we've seen a lot more clients moving away from that over the last 12 to 18 months too. I think for a
Yep.
long time in e-commerce that it was just table stakes that there'd be a pop-up for 10 to 15% off your first order that would come there. We've seen a
Yep.
lot of clients start to move away from that as they've seen pressures on margins elsewhere, as well as pressures on consumer demand. There's a lot lower consumer sentiment this year than last year, and users are holding on to those dollars a lot more tightly. So if we can maintain our margins while also using a gift to increase that product experience, then I see that as a win-win.
Yep. I completely agree. So let's go ahead and transition here. Let's talk about implementation. So we've talked about framework. We've talked about some very specific Q4 strategies. And again, there's more we could talk about, but these are the three that we see as the probably the biggest bang for the buck, specifically when it comes to increasing AOV. Now, the reason why we've got Julia here today is because Rebuy is our tool of choice for all of these implementations. And so we asked Julia to join us today so she could walk us through really some examples of how easy this is to set up with Rebuy. So in a lot of cases, obviously we set these up for our clients, but in a lot of cases, if you guys have Rebuy, you can set a lot of these up on your own. And so let's go and transition, Julia. And I'm happy to sort of drive on the slides here, but I think, let's maybe touch, a little bit lightly on, how easy it is to set up just simple upsells in the cart and in the checkout. But I think where we should double down on is this idea of like bundling, because I think that's where a lot of brands sort of get stuck with implementation is they start to ask the question around, okay, yeah, bundles sound great, but how do we implement it in Shopify? It's not super easy to do. So let's talk about sort of the different ways that Rebuy can help make that easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so happy to be here. And before we get into a couple of like the actual examples of what the different bundling mechanisms look like, I definitely agree with you. The reason that Rebuy has continued to be so successful and we work super closely with partners like Blue Stout would be that to your point, we really decrease the amount of time it takes to implement these things on the site. And then taking it a step further, you're able to easily like customize that and then test, right? Typically, we do recommend working with a partner like Blue Stout just because that still takes time to update the layout and make sure it's aligned with brand guidelines. And as you mentioned, time after time, like you need to have a deliberate approach when it comes to testing because, as it was mentioned previously, people would just put discounts up and hope for the best and that it like increases, the number of orders. But taking a step back, I think what was helpful also is thinking about margins as well as not just how do we make sure we're getting enough orders, but like what does the increase in order value look like? So that's where Rebuy comes in. But in terms of implementation, I mean, even as part of onboarding, we all go through a practice of like implementing a couple widgets. I'm not a developer and was able to do it. So I think that speaks volumes to, what it is like to actually implement this. And then again, typically recommend working with an agency who can help with the customization as well as the testing. And as it was mentioned, like continuing to iterate on it. So those would be some of my thoughts on just like the ease of it, why it exists, why it has continued to be successful. Let's get into the first example. And we can just go through a couple of these and the value. Really for today, what I wanted to focus on is best practices our clients see when it comes to bundling. And there are different mechanisms for bundling. So again, as mentioned, like all of these are important. What's going to kind of like depend is the brand, the offering, and then again, working with a partner or setting up A/B testing and being able to implement to understand like what is successful in reaching your audience in the best way possible. Here would be a dynamic bundle. Again, there is an option where if you wanted to bundle this together, you could discount it potentially. I think that goes back to the question that was asked earlier, Alan, with your post around like, is there an incentive to purchase now together versus later separately, right? So there's almost two mechanisms you can consider with this example. One for together now could simply be like, I love this brand as a consumer. I want to do my 5-step skincare routine with this brand. So discount or no discount doesn't matter. I just need to order all of these things now so that I can like set this up as part of my evening routine. Of course, some sort of discount can always help too. And again, that can be tested. So you could do like a 5% off, or you could display the dollar amount off and test that to see which one is resonating more with your customers.
And I
And
think also in the skincare routine example is just a great example too of the sort of the other question to ask, which is, does this additional product make the original product more valuable? And I think when you start to think about a routine, it's like these are products that are all made to work together versus, buying a luminosity eye serum and then going to a different brand to buy your, dewy daycare cream, right? Kind of the
yeah,
type of a scenario where it's like these have all been formulated to work together. And so there's an incentive to use these together for a greater outcome, 1 + 1 = 4 kind of scenario. And so I think skincare is a great example of where that can be done.
agreed. I totally agree. I mean, it's again, same as like when you go to the dentist, if you're brushing your teeth but also not flossing, you're not going to have the same intended outcome. So it definitely aligns well with your point around, does the cross sell make the main product more desirable? Like skincare
Yep.
would be absolutely. This would be an example where, again, you could see what that percentage off would look like on site. And again, it's worth A/B testing to figure out. And as Eric mentioned, being mindful of margins. Like if the 10% discount for this type of thing is not going to bode well with some of your revenue goals, I would definitely recommend start with the first one, A/B test, see how that goes. But if a discount is a potential for a bundle, you could also like set parameters, right? Maybe we offer a discount if the order is going to be 100 plus, anywhere above that, versus if it's like a below, we wouldn't offer that. So it's going to depend on the brand, the goals, margins, all of those. But of course, it goes back again to those questions around incentive to purchase together, and does the cross sell make it more desirable when it's in a bundle?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then again, this is just like a different visual aesthetic. Again, similar concept. We're all in the bundling, but this would be carousel plus a product add-on, right? So similar to, if you're like in the grocery store, the way that it is visually presented is going to determine what and how you purchase. That would be the premise with the carousel and product add-on. Of course, too, like leveraging the option of subscription. You want to be mindful for what the product is and the frequency, but you can also update the parameters of the timeline, right? So maybe you want it to be the options could be every 60, 90, 120 a days. Maybe that would be beneficial when knowing like, okay, this serum that I'm going to add with this set, I usually do run out of quite quickly.
And I think this is where I would step in and I'd say this is where A/B testing becomes so important because when you do start to add in things that are additional products to consider at the point of purchase, right? So if this is product page as an example, this could equally derail somebody from their purchase decision of the existing product on the page just by getting them to click and just understand what is the HA hydrating serum. Like what is that, right? Learn more, right? Or you would sort of derail them from the current path they are on. And so this is a scenario where, and maybe that's okay, and maybe that decreases conversion rates a little bit, but AOV jumps so high that it compensates for it by seeing a higher average revenue per session. So this is where really understanding and monitoring your data and running A/B testing becomes really, really important, especially the bigger your brand is, because obviously those types of impacts are going to impact you bigger, the bigger the brand is. Also thinking about new versus returning customers. And so whether or not you display upsells and cross sells to new versus returning. If you have a really high returning customer rate, maybe it makes more sense, and again, this has to be a data-driven decision, makes more sense to not offer upsells and cross sells to new visitors and new buyers, but to only offer to returning, because we want to focus on getting somebody to make that first purchase and then come back for more, and then upselling them for a higher AOV on the second time around. So lots of things to consider that I don't think a lot of brands consider when they set these up. And so the beauty of rebuy is that they're very easy to set up, but also the beauty of rebuy is you can A/B test. And so I don't think enough brands are A/B testing into these decisions.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Testing is so important. So I couldn't agree more. And then we can go to the star of the show for today on the rebuy
Yeah, let's talk about bundles for sure. So this is,
content.
I think, probably and I'll lead you into this one a little bit, Julia. But I think what's fascinating about the bundle builder is that it does make it very easy. And this is a scenario, especially for Q4, where historically we've done a ton of legwork for brands to sort of set up very customized incentive-based tiers and ways to get people to add more to cart during the holidays. And I think Rebuy has made this very easy. So I think this is the piece for everybody watching that's considering implementations for Q4. This is an amazing tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Bundle Builder, to your point, a lot of times it's not that it didn't exist before, but the amount of like dev work and just little updates you had to make to try to create this was very intense. And now having kind of the foundational rebuy bundle builder and then being able to test, update style, etc., it goes a long way. Another really important piece I would say is I have heard from multiple different people at brands, right? Like we love Rebuy. We've used it for every brand that we've worked for at different brands. But Bundle Builder so far has been the number one performing widget. So the performance is definitely huge. The reason that it's been also super effective, right? Like the fixed bundles, which we discussed earlier, are all helpful and beneficial. Some of the challenges that can come up at times would be, right, like the flexibility if it comes to, fixed bundles, the user experience, and as was mentioned, the complex setup. So what's really beneficial about Bundle Builder is you're going to be able to have curated, personalized bundles and a very flexible and on-brand experience with limited coding, no meta fields required. So that's really helpful. We can go to the next one that actually shows a visual example too. This would be an example of what it could look like. And again, it's also creating the ownership with the customer. So any customer that's in like looking through a bundle builder is going to be highly engaged with it because they get to actually dictate and determine the amount of each item, and how many items you want to add within that bundle.
Yeah, I love the incentive structure too, where it's
Mhm.
in this case it is a discount incentive structure, but still it's you can do the math on this to understand sort of shipping costs and margin, et cetera, what makes the most sense for your brand. But it gamifies the bundle builder, and we've seen this be very successful in the holidays too.
And I think we think of that as something we call the IKEA effect, where when you're shopping at IKEA and you get a piece of furniture and like you actually have to take it home and build it, you get a greater sense of value and appreciation of that because you had to build it. This I think of as the digital equivalent to that, right? As you're building a bundle and you're being incentivized to do so, you're also putting time and effort into it that you want to make sure that you are getting something for that time and effort. So I think users are more likely to complete a purchase, to go from like add to cart to completed checkout from something like a builder than just a standard product detail page.
Yep. And these are just, I think, a couple more examples of that,
Yep,
Julia, for a
exactly.
few different brands, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can see a couple different examples of how it's displayed, right? So if you go one above, it's a skincare brand. You can see that it's a percentage off, and then when you go to the next one, you can see that they have like the dollar amount off. So you saved $10, and it went from
Hmm.
75 to 65. So again, A/B testing, figuring out what works best for your brand. And then the last one, um, what I think is interesting about this is you can see in the bundle, it's a screenshot, but when you click on like that number 8, you could also change the number. So if you wanted to do a 12 pack instead of an 8 pack,
Yep.
that's an option. And you can create, instead of a one-time purchase, it could be a subscription if you wanted as well. So I think what's cool about it too, it can work for so many different industries. Just I think these 3 examples highlight the differences of how you'd want to display it. Do you want to add an option of subscription or not? And play around with some of those as well.
Cool. No, I love it. Um, all right, guys. If you have any questions about sort of bundles, and bundle configurations, or anything you're thinking about doing for the holidays, feel free to drop those in. Happy to answer any Q&A. We will also, we've got a couple brands kind of in our back pocket here that Eric and I are going to pull up, and we can start to do some live teardowns of what they're doing well on their site as some examples. You guys can sort of see how we think about this. But we'd love to, again, there's no requirements here, but if anybody feels like they would love to have their site torn down, happy to take a look at your site live. Happy to answer any questions you have about your site. Feel free just to drop it in the chat and with a comment if there's something very specific you'd like us to look at. Happy to do that. But I think in the meantime, I think Eric, why don't we go ahead and take a look at a couple brands here. If we can get the load. And chose a couple brands. Well, this is a sort of a higher ticket item. Obviously, it's paddle boards and sort of related, sort of paddle related sort of gear. They do, I always forget how to pronounce this brand. These are either boat or bote. But I think let's talk about. I think probably we should jump into a standard product page here, and let's take a look at what they're doing well and not doing well on the product. So let's look at paddle boards. Let's pick a paddle board. This is an interesting one because we're starting off right off the bat with a pretty high AOV product. Not seeing any product page upsells or cross sells going on. Let's see if they do anything here on cart. Oh, here we go. Now that took a while to load though, which is interesting.
Yeah, not great for holiday in particular.
Not great for holiday at all, and I'm sure it would have been even slower on mobile. So that's another piece too, guys. As you're heading into the holidays here, make sure you're doing some sort of site speed scoring and testing across multiple different device types, multiple different types of browser types to see where you're lagging behind. Especially if you're driving a lot of traffic through paid advertising on mobile channels like Instagram, as an example, any meta platform. You're going to see slower load times on mobile specifically, and that could be the difference between somebody moving forward with a quick purchase and completely bouncing. So a good example of how that can affect sort of the usability of the site. All right, Eric, do you want to jump in and maybe talk through some of your thoughts on the product page?
Yeah, so the first thing that actually jumped out right to me is, okay, you have these essentials. They're listed out with the checkbox. That's great. I would hope that they tested that above or below the add to cart because it's going to push that add to cart button a considerable amount farther down the page.
Yeah, I think if
But
you even like an average screenshot is probably closer to this.
yeah. And then, but I do think there's a strong argument to be made for them to be where they are because those accessories are really like, I think the differentiators for this brand, right? Like there's a ton of inflatable stand-up pedal boards out there, but like these accessories are awesome. Like this looks so
Yep.
cool. A lot of these, I would actually question more so the placement, the layout more so, right? So like I think that it's great that they have them included here on the product detail page, but I would wonder if the product detail page is the right template to be using for. I almost feel like that bundle builder type of an approach would be a really cool way to do this. So like if you click on like the fourth or fifth image in that product gallery, like you'll see like those you get
Yep.
a good look at the accessories, right? Like there's the cooler, the like I don't know if that's like a backrest or like a thing you stand on in the back, and like the water bottle holder and like the paddle holder, like there's a bunch of really cool stuff. Like you can have
Hmm.
effectively like just like a tricked out stand-up paddleboard.
Yep.
But I don't know that these little line item checkboxes are doing a good job of like communicating how like awesome all these add-ons are, right? Like, is
Agreed.
that doing enough to increase those cart values and take rates on each of those? I think like a bundle builder could be a really cool way to do it, just the way that you like if you're on like a auto site, right? And you're like building your, like your dream Mercedes or something, and you can pick like
Hmm.
the trim and the color and the badging and all that stuff, and then see the image update. Doing a bundle builder like that kind of like shows your configuration would be a really cool way to allow users to play around with some different configurations and see how it actually looks instead of kind of an example of here's everything and then here's a just like checklist of kind of like things that you can add on because those checklist items, in addition to the baseline, like base product, are, they're pretty expensive, right? It's a high ticket item. And I think that there's probably more storytelling that we want to be able to do relative to each of those add-ons to increase those take rates.
Yeah, completely agree. There's not enough information being explained about each of these to really understand the value. I think like a great example of this would be the Magna bottle. I mean, if you kind of read through through the lines here, you can kind of understand what it means. But at the end of the day, it's like there's a magnet that's actually built into the paddleboard where this actually sticks to it, and that's why it's not just a water bottle, right? A $60 water bottle is expensive, but like this one is actually physically built so that it doesn't move when it's on this brand paddleboard, as an
Yeah,
example.
which is really cool. And then like with the utility there, right? Then you're not going to lose it in the water and not be able to get it back, right? Like that I think makes a much more compelling argument of whatever you said it was, 60 bucks, 40 bucks,
Yeah.
right? Because then you don't have to buy it twice when it rolls off your paddleboard.
Let's see. Okay, add to cart. Interesting. So it's not a slider cart. They go straight to oh man, this they got some issues going on their site today.
They need a rebuy smart card is what they need.
Uh-huh. That they do. Straight to cart. No upsells on the cart page. Yeah, this is a pretty poor upsell experience, I think, overall. I think a lot of potential here.
And even with all
Yeah.
the space here, like that's another place where you could do, even if you don't want to invest in like the full build out of like a kind of like uh builder bundle, kind of like live preview of your configuration. Right here, you could have a little bit larger images and more information about each of those add-ons and how cool they are to add to your purchase.
Cool. Anything else you want to double click on of this one, or should we move on to the next here?
Those were two that I mean, those just jumped right off the page. Let's take a look at another one. I think that was good first example.
Yeah, and while you're pulling
Uh,
up the next example, it looks like they are rebuy customers. So I would definitely recommend reach out. We can help with optimizations and further areas because to your point, like Smart Cart would be a great add-on. I know that like their checkout extensions are ones that they're utilizing, but a lot of other things we can help with.
yeah, I think there's a ton of opportunity to test in some better positioning, especially on product pages and cart for them, especially if they now that know that they're on rebuy, they've got so many opportunities that we need to they should be better they should be better optimized. And actually it looks like Becca just shared Tucker Nuck. So let's go ahead and take a look at Tucker Nuck. My wife loves your brand, Becca. All right. I think let's just jump straight in. So, latest styles. So I think let's go ahead and just jump straight into a product page here. All right, great imagery, by the way. Love the large imagery that really does focus on sort of the model imagery. Love the information about the model. This is something that we've tested into that always seems to, I shouldn't say always, because never always, but typically performs well, is doing a really good job of understanding sizing and using the model as an example and a proxy for understanding sizing and sizing choice. Huge in apparel. See this work very well, pretty frequently. Um, let's look at Eric, and feel free to jump if any comments you have just generally on the
If you actually
page.
scroll down below the buy box, they have a really good how to style
Hmm.
it section, right?
Yep.
Like this is the one area where I think it almost always benefits to like manually curate these as opposed to relying on like a recommendation algorithm is
Ooh.
allowing users to shop the look, right? Like this is done really well in that it allows users to buy an outfit, right? Instead of just an item, which is a great way to improve average order values especially when it comes to apparel. This is a really, really great way to drive those average order values up during the holiday season.
Yeah, and a great they and the relevancy of that pop-up is great. It shows the original product, shows the styling, as well as the information that's available on that product page. If you want to see the full details, you can go see the full details, but it doesn't force you into an additional product page in order to make that decision. So it keeps them in the current purchase flow. Yeah, I think that's great. Let's see. Let's go ahead and add to let's choose a size. It's going slow. That might just be me today. There we go. Uh-oh. All right. Not sure why it's flickering that way. That's strange. I'm not sure what's going on. This might be my computer today, guys. But
It's
um
it's definitely snappier on my site,
is it
Becca.
okay?
Don't worry.
Don't freak out, Becca.
Al, that might be your connection, maybe just because you're hosting and screen
It's probably because
sharing
I'm
and
it's probably
doing it
because I'm
all right
hosting.
now.
All right, just for you.
I do
Okay.
like those just for you recommendations. I was just looking through those. I mean, I think like I'm not super familiar with the catalog, but it looks like it is like higher price points. All of these are lower than what's currently there. I think that's a good one. The only thing I might be interested to test, Becca, if you haven't done this already, is maybe even in place of that just for you, in the instance where you have a single item there, I might even hit users again with those recommendations from the how to style it just because
Hmm.
it is so far down that product detail page. I think that could be a really interesting one to at least A/B test. Like, is it more effective to upsell that outfit on the product detailed page as it would be on the drawer cart? Knowing from what we know that that drawer cart is typically does attract a higher take rate on upsells. I think the reason for that too is like if I'm on the product detail page, I'm usually like a little bit more like narrowly focused on the primary product, right? Like, do I want to purchase this item? I maybe haven't gotten to the point where I'm considering complementary items or expanding my purchase to an entire outfit. But once I've made that first decision to add to cart, then you get a little bit farther into the process. There's really not a ton of decisions to make in the cart. It's like forward or keep shopping, right? That is why I think it tends to be more effective to do a little bit of cross-sell and upsell in the drawer cart than on product detail pages. And for the level of relevance of the kind of like how to style it, I think may be able to outperform some of the other items, which just looks like maybe popular bottoms to complement the dress category, maybe is how that's currently set up. But yeah, I think that'd be an interesting test if you haven't done that already.
Yeah, I think, and Becca started asking, saying they've got a quote unquote similar item section already on the PDP, and so kind of wondering how that impacts kind of upsell cross sell. And so
Mhm.
Becca, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, other than meaning does that affect what you would put in the cart? And I think the argument would be made is that if you were to look at sort of scroll depth on your PDPs, like through heat mapping, et cetera, you'd probably see that you're getting, your the amount of people because your imagery is so huge, which is great, helps sell the product, but you're probably losing a lot of people before they get to here, right? And so at the end of the day, having that additional place to upsell into how to style and additional products in the cart is just sort of a second chance at that. Again, we'd recommend testing into that to make sure it doesn't hurt conversions, but that's I think Eric what you're recommending, right?
Yeah, and I think I would also say like one, I think like interesting surprise that we tend to see with product recommendations like the similar items that are kind of like lower in that page hierarchy. At this point, we've moved beyond like a consideration of the product page on which we're on. What we tend to see is these actually are less impactful towards average order value, but more impactful towards conversion rate. We'll see users utilize these as like wayfinding and product discovery tools. Once they've moved beyond like disqualified their interest in the main item, it's usually a lot easier to continue to browse through these than it is to like open up your aperture all the way back to like the home page or like a broad collection page. So a lot of times we'll see these types of widgets have an even greater impact on conversion rate than they do on like units per transaction.
Yeah, I think it's a good differentiation. Becca, does that help answer your question? Happy to dig into that a little more if you've got an additional question there. Cool. All right. Eric, anything else you'd add just by looking at the page in general?
Nothing jumps out at me. It looks good. I love the
Yeah.
photography. It looks like you guys must be racking up a lot of airline miles with the photography here.
It's all AI. Just kidding. All right, let's take a look at it. We got a couple minutes left here if anybody else wants to. Let's see here. If anyone wants to add another URL. Otherwise, I think maybe we'll take a look at Freefly Apparel real quick here on their product page just to wrap things up. All right. One, I think the full page imagery is super interesting and engaging. It does obviously take up a lot of the real estate that would be used as part of that buy box, which I think is interesting, right? So you're going to be definitely lowering your scroll depth or forcing kind of more scrolling in order to get to some more pertinent information about the product. I'd be really curious to see what the data looks behind that from a conversion standpoint. Complete the look though. I do like that. What we're doing here is offering the exact same products that are being positioned in that model shot though. I do think that is well done here on the side. And at this point, it's not hindering scroll at all because they're utilizing, I think, the sort of the space, the full width space here of the page really well. But Eric, curious to hear what you think.
I love the full width image. I think this is so cool that they are building out these assets such that they can be full width behind those buy box variant selections. I like it because it's really unique, but it's unique in a way that doesn't change the structure of the site or of the page rather. So like the layout itself is very, very typical, right? Like product image, all the combination
Mm.
selections, add to cart, right? All of those things are in all the right places. So it's easy to navigate, but it also still feels like special and unique in a way in that it has this full width image. A few other things I'll point out too that I just think that they're doing really well since we've been talking a little bit about apparel is I really like the just landed badge on product detail pages. A lot of times we
Hmm.
see people forget to put those on the product detail page and they only live on a product listing. The product detail pages are usually as frequently used as a landing page, if not more so, than collection pages. So you want people to know that additional attribute here as well. For their variant selection, though, I might put that in a drop down. There's a lot of options there, right? All of those options, and even on page load, it tells me, so I think for you too, I'm not sure what size you have selected, that there's only 7 left, right? So like I think a little UI, probably adjustment there to be made. But there's so many options. We usually see the bright line in that decision point of variant selection in like a visual layout versus a drop down at a count of 5 to 7. Once you get past 7 options, that's usually better served within a drop down. The caveat there is unless we're talking about colors. When it comes to size, though, usually that's best served in a drop down. I also really like that they have the call out to the loyalty program right below the add to cart. A lot of times we think of loyalty as a retention tool, but letting people know that their purchase today will be rewarded in the future can actually have a positive effect on first purchase or first time conversion rates, in addition to being able to pull those users back in for more frequent repurchases.
Awesome. Love it. Let's see. Let's just add to cart real quick. Let's see what they're doing on cart. Let's give it a second to load. But to me, this is a excellent opportunity for an upsell right here. $12 away from free shipping. That's about 10%. It's been a 10 per, it'd be an upsell that's approximately 10% of the order value. Kind of well below that 20% we were talking about earlier, Eric.
Yeah.
This feels like a big opportunity.
And it looks like they have like it's a great way to like move like final sale stuff too, especially during the holiday. Like if you have a bunch of broken size runs and you know that you have something, what is that, 30 by 30 you have the variant in there. You know you have like, okay, here's some broken size run pant that I have. Like, let's try to move that, right? You can use it to create operational efficiencies in order to lessen your warehouse space if you're using a 3PL, or you can use it to just drive top line revenue. So there's a lot of ways we could be putting that real estate to use.
Yep. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we're right about at the hour. Unless anybody has another site they want us to do a quick teardown of, I think we'll let everybody go, and we'll call this one a wrap for today. Julia, anything you'd want to add?
No, just love all of the insights for today. And I think, yeah, my biggest takeaway is, as always, cross sells are important, but you guys really embodied, where to put them, how to test them, and how to show the value. So loved seeing the collaboration today.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thanks
And
for joining us again. Eric, go ahead.
I was going to say, great job to everyone that attended too. You are actually ahead of the ball. You won't believe how many people start panicking about their average cart values in the middle of November. So thank you for joining today, well in advance of of emergency mode.
It's a great point. Make sure you're taking the steps today to get those upsells and cross sells ready for the holiday, mainly so that you've got some time to test into them. That's I think the people miss that a lot as they start to slap upsell cross sells for the holiday. They start doing it too late and they're kind of just guessing versus starting to dial some of that in early. So awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining today. We'll be doing another one of these in October. So if you're on the newsletter, just keep your eyes peeled, and we'll let you guys know when the next one is. Thanks, everybody.